Hi, a very good afternoon to all, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining our session here today. It's approximately about 3:01 right now. We wait for a couple of minutes for more participants to join the session, and then we'll commence. So please kindly wait for a bit. So it's approximately 3:05 right now. A very good afternoon to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us in our first session for the Research Writing and Publication Workshop series. In today's session, we'll be talking about how you can get published in an international energy journal. And I would like to welcome our speakers for today. We have with us Dr. Yan Jingyue, who is a professor of energy engineering from the Royal Institute of Technology and Mälardalen University in Sweden. We have with us today Professor Patricia Thornley, who is the director of the Energy and Bioproducts Research Institute at Aston University, who is also the director of the UK's SuperGen Bioenergy Hub. We have also Dr. Lee Kiat Tong, who is a professor at the School of Chemical Engineering and the Director of Research Creativity and Management Office from the University Science Malaysia. And also Yan Sun, who is the Executive Publisher at Energy, who has more than 10 years experience in STM publishing industry. In today's agenda for the first hour, we'll be talking to you on an introduction to scholarly publishing. We'll be showcasing on how you can prepare a good manuscript, and we'll be talking about how you can write a good review paper. The next hour itself will comprise of an editorial panel discussion where the four speakers will share their thoughts on questions which we have posed. And lastly, the last part of the session will comprise of questions which will be submitted by you. So a couple of housekeeping rules that we'd like to share with you. This session, as you probably have heard at the beginning, will be recorded and we'll share with you the presentation as well as the slides. If you have any questions, you can ask questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom that you can see at the top corner. For those of you who like to frame your questions in Thai or Bahasa Indonesia, please feel free to do so. Our colleagues would actually assist you in addressing some of your questions as well. Materials and e-certificates will be provided after the webinar itself. And if any of you have any problem with the audio, you can try refreshing or to log off and to log on again. So without further ado, I'll pass the session on to Sun Yan.
Sure, thanks, Nicholas. Let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen in the presenting mode? Yes, good. This is good. Okay, thanks, Nicholas, for the kind introduction, and very warm welcome to every one of you to join this online publishing workshop. We are focusing on energy research publications today, and it is really my great honor to deliver this session with our three very respected editors for our top energy journals. So for the next 15 minutes, I will just start with an introduction to scholarly publishing. Let me first share with you a collection of our energy journals published by Elsevier. As you can see, we have a very high quality and a very comprehensive energy journal portfolio. We have journals with, for example, a few has around 100 years old. And we also have new journals launched just earlier this year, Advances in Applied Energy and e-Transportation launched last year. And as you can also see that our energy journals covered very broad scope of subject areas from energy policy, bioenergy, fuel processing, also renewable energy. So our goal is really to provide publishing platform for every researchers wherever you need to publish. There are a few new journals launched recently focusing on open access publishing requirements. As you can see, some of the new journals are spin-off of established journals, like Fuel Communications, Journal of Power Sources Advances, Advances in Applied Energy. We also launched standalone new Gold Open Access journals, like the Applications in Energy and Combustion Science. We flipped one journal, Energy Strategy Reviews, from hybrid journal to Gold Open Access to support open access publication needs. And as you can also notice, we have a mirror journal, Energy Conversion and Management X, which is following exactly the same editorial team with our parent journal, Energy Conversion and Management, but providing a Gold Open Access platform for our authors. So I hope you could find any or some of the journals useful for your research, and we always welcome your submissions to our journals. So without further ado, let me start from introduction to the publishing circle. Since the first scholarly journal launched in 1665, more than 300 years ago, the publishing process has remained quite consistent. We always start from soliciting and managing submissions, and the submitted articles will go through a peer review process. After peer review reports received, the editors would make a decision based on the comments. And then after acceptance, the article would enter production process, and the publisher would help you to publish and disseminate globally of your research output. Throughout the whole process, the volume of the academic publishing has been growing tremendously, as you can see. For Elsevier, we now receive more than 2 million submissions every year across the around 3,000 journals. And for the peer review process, as you can see, we have more than 800,000 reviewers, more than 70,000 board members, and more than 20,000 editors. Overall, more than 1 million researchers, experts are supporting the peer review process to help your article to get improvements and also get published. For the accepted articles, recently we accept more than 500,000 articles per year. And looking at the submissions, you can calculate roughly the average acceptance rate is quite low. It's around 20 to 30% on average. But it of course varies for different journals. For our production platform, ScienceDirect, now there are actually more than 17 million articles available, and there are more than 4,000 journals available on the platform. And we have readers across globally, more than 120 countries, and more than 11 million researchers actually downloading every day from ScienceDirect. This is pretty much the publishing circle we are managing every day now, which is, of course, extremely expanded compared to 300 years ago. The core process of publishing circle to authors is, of course, this peer review process. And I'm sure authors are all very cautious and keen on the peer review process, how to manage it. This is just a rough workflow followed by most of our journals. When authors submitted to the journal, our journal editors would first screen your article before sending it to reviewers to evaluate whether the article is, with good value, good enough quality to move to the next step. As you can see, as I highlighted here, in this step, there are already around 30 to 70% articles got rejected. For example, the journal Energy Conversion and Management, we reject already around 70% articles in this step. There are various values of this step. For example, for the authors, we wanted to help authors to accelerate their publication. If your article is really not suitable for the journal, a desk rejection could help author to move to other more suitable journals to submit, to save your time. And also from the reviewer's perspective, we wanted to present the most high quality and articles fitting the journal the best to our reviewers, to value the time that reviewers contributed to the journal. So I hope that could explain why we have a relatively amount of rejections in the desk rejection screening step. If your article has been has passed the editor's screening, editor would invite reviewers to give comments. It enters this peer review process. For most of our energy journals, we require minimal 2 peer review reports before editors make decision. So, but sometimes if the topic is, editor find the topic requires more comments, more evaluation, there could be 3, 4, 5 comments received for your article. So don't be panic if it's more than 2 review comments received for your article. And be assured that all reviewers and editors would just want to help you to improve your article, not to just criticize your article. After the review reports received by the editors, the editor would make a decision. It could be rejection. We still reject 20 to 40% of article at this stage, and it could be revisions or acceptance in very rare case. So overall, as you can see, the whole process would reject 50 to 80% articles. Only the top quality articles would be successful and publish in the journals afterwards. So how to make your article to be more attractive and when the chance of publication. Professor Li and Professor Surley will share with you more on the manuscript preparing and specifically review articles. But here I'd like to share with you a few points that how editors and reviewers look into your article. In the screening stage, the editor would look for, firstly, whether your article is fitting the aims and scope. You might not be able to imagine how many articles was rejected because of out of the scope. We do hope authors could read our guide for authors, read our aims and scope of the journal before your submission. editors and the editorial board team would get together and discuss on the wording and the message to be presented in the guide for author and aims and scope from time to time. So we do hope to provide very accurate and helpful guidelines in the aims and scope and guide for authors. Apart from aim scope, of course, some manuscript might be returned because of poor language. We don't reject an article only because of language, but if the language is not clear, it's not understandable for the reviewers, we also don't want to waste reviewers' time and would instead require authors to improve your language first before a next round of submission. And apart from language, the science communication also need to be communicated clearly. So clearly present your hypotheses and your methods, your results, analysis. That's very important. The editor would initially evaluate whether the research is scientifically correct and robust, whether it is original, whether there's any potential of plagiarism already in this stage. Those articles will, of course, be rejected, returned to the author. And editors would evaluate whether there's any new insights. For different journals, there's different level of expectation on innovation, but editors have the best position to evaluate whether your research output is innovative enough to fit this journal's expectation. So this is roughly what editors would look for. If you pass the pre-screening, the reviewers will also look into your article in more details and give more comprehensive and informative comments to help you improve your article. We ask reviewers to look at importance and clarity of the research hypothesis. This is, of course, very important for a successful article. Reviewers will continue to check if this article is original. We got quite some reviewers commented that there's potential plagiarism because the reviewer has read this similar research somewhere else or received a submission somewhere else during editorial process. Originality is really important for your article. So I will show you a little bit how the tool is helping us to check on originality. The reviewers are also asked to check the strengths and weakness throughout your article, the methodology, your experiment, statistical approach, whether these are robust and scientifically with value, and how your interpretation of the results is in a good manner or with weakness for improvements. Reviewers also look at the writing style, how the figure and table are presented, whether in a professional level, whether it's aligned with the standard requirements of your research area. And last but not least is ethics concerns. Reviewers always check on whether there's any potential ethics concern. For health sciences, it's related to animal, human experiments sometimes. For energy research, we have less on that. But we do have sometimes conflict of interest with some industry companies, any funding involved. So those are all be checked by the reviewers. We wish you could pass the reviewers' evaluation. So your article from novelty and the technical perspective, both with high quality for reviewers to recommend editors to proceed further with your article. Based on reviewers' comments or based on editors' evaluation, your paper could get decision from editors. Sometimes it's reject. That's a rejection without peer review. But it could hopefully helpful for you to find a more suitable journal. Sometimes it's acceptance without peer review, without further review. It happens really very rarely. So in most cases, the decision from editor could be either minor revision or major revision. In that case, you would need to look through reviewers' comments, improve your article, and consider resubmit. Sometimes it's rejected after peer review, and we will then provide article transfer services sometimes to your article, suggesting a more suitable journal for your research. When you receive the editor's decision, I'm not sure how you usually feel about that. Our recommendation to you is, firstly, please stay calm. No matter is acceptance without peer review or without any comments, then you could probably celebrate immediately. But in most cases, when you receive any suggestions, comments from editors, you stay calm. You read the comments, reread the comments, and get someone else, your supervisor probably, to help you read the comments. It is very important that the authors read carefully the comments from reviewers and editors and respond step by step. Make it comprehensive, detailed, and to the point. If you find the comments confusing to you, you take a break, have some rest, and if it's still confusing to you, don't hesitate or don't stop yourself from reaching out to the editors to clarify the comments, help you make the revision better for your article. And you really should have we would suggest you have a kind of table details every comment and the change required, help you to guide through the revision process. So how to respond to the comments? You deal with minor revisions first and then major revisions, and drafting your response letter. But the golden rules is really to be polite, be thorough, and answer with evidence. Don't just say that, I got it, I understand, but explain specifically how you're gonna improve and where you have improved. Treat the response as rigorous as your manuscript itself. If you don't agree with the reviewer or editor and you don't want to make a change, that's fine, but you really need to explain with evidence why you decide to do that. And for the editors to decide and make further decisions on that. So you could consider, to resubmit your revised version to the journal, or you consider another journal. We have now the article transfer services. Sometimes editor would actually suggest you to transfer another more suitable journal. Make use of this kind of service, help you to accelerate publication and be successful in publication. You might submit a very rough and simple version at the beginning, but after all the comments received from your editors, reviewers, your car really gets elaborated in a more detailed and a more fancy way. But in scientific publishing, all those comments are really helping to make your research to be comprehensive and with the best value for the other researchers to read and establish research based on your already research achievements. So don't be afraid of any research comments and any critical views received from others. Just be polite, be calm, and improve and get through this publication. I will just roughly go through a little bit on the ethics aspect of the editorial and peer review process. I want to highlight that the whole process is confidential. When there's any ethics concerns, we always make sure it's confidential before any final decision was reached. And we respect authors' honest response. There could be different ways of dealing with ethics issues, withdrawal, retraction, or removal. But in the end, editors would make the decision based on the support from publishers. There are so many types of ethics issues nowadays, and we can't even list all of them on the slide. But I have listed the most common found cases like research fraud, plagiarism. Sometimes you have fake reviewers and authors. Sometimes there is research standard violations, problem with conflict of interest that were not disclosed. We have authorship disputes, summation problem, duplicated publication, and sometimes there's a citation manipulation. So be careful and avoid those kind of ethics issues. These are not only for authors, but for reviewers and editors. There are, of course, also ethics requirements. Everyone needs to behave ethical in this process. This is just a quick screenshot of how the cross-check report would look. This is the tool we use for every article. So upon submission received, we already generated a cross-check report to check the similarity rate of your article. It will show the duplicated part with already published articles and is provided to editors for decision. But be aware that human interpretation is always required. We don't really look at the number, and sometimes authors ask, is 20% acceptable or 15% acceptable? It's not always the case. We always rely on editors' interpretation and the decision. There's also authorship issues. As a young author, when you list your co-authors, be sure to think about whether author has substantial contribution, whether contributed in the manuscript, and have final approved your manuscript before your submission. So authors need to be accountable for all aspects of the work. The first author is usually the one who conducted and supervised the most, make the substantial contribution to the article. And for co-authors, they must have scientific contribution to the research. If unfortunately there is an ethical problem happen to your article, there could be different various ways of results. Decisions made by the editors. Sometimes it's express of concern if it's really not a serious issue, but good to address. But in most cases, we would publish corrigendum or withdraw this article or reject this article, depending on the status of the article, but also how serious this issue is to address. In very rare case, we will remove or replace the article, but it happens only to a problem with linked to serious health risk or legal risk in that case. That's pretty much what I want to share today. There are more resources available in Elsevier's Research Academy, and please do feel free to take a chance to join the courses. There are quite hundreds of courses that are available to authors. In the end, I just want to say thank you to all of our readers, authors, and reviewers, and our editors to, still very actively contributing to the publication during this pandemic. Thank you all very much. Now, I will pass the floor to Professor Li, who will share with you from editor's perspective on preparing a manuscript. Thank you. Let me just stop sharing. Did I stop?
You're still sharing, so might just have to pause for a bit. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, right. Thanks.
No worries.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, so I think I can take over from here. Thank you, Sun Yan, for setting the stage. So I guess my screen is up, is it?
Yes, yep. It is.
Okay. Again, thank you, Sun Yan, for setting the stage. And I would like to wish a very, very good afternoon to all of you that is joining our workshop today, or maybe good morning, depending on where you are in this globe. So my section, I will try to share with you my perspective from an editor and also an author, how to prepare a good manuscript, right? And before I start, I guess I need to make it clear that there's actually no one single rule. How do you prepare a good manuscript? So what I'm going to share with you is actually my experience as an author for more than 15 years, and also my experience as an editor for handling energy conversion and management articles for the last more than 5 years, right? So again, there's no hardcore one rule that fits all. What I'm telling you now is basically based on my experience, right? So I always like to use the analogy of a storybook when you write an article. You know what's the similarity of an article and a storybook? First of all, you need to have a content, right? So what do you mean that you need to have a content? So meaning to say that you must have a discovery. You must have discovered something that is interesting to you, that you want to share with your peers throughout the whole world, right? So this comes to novelty, right? People always say that every article that you decide to write on needs to have a novelty, right? And I often get many people often ask me the question, how do you define novelty? How do you decide whether you have sufficient content to write an article to be considered for publication in a journal, right? So I have shared this many times, and it's actually up to discussion. We can actually have one full day of discussing and see different people will have different perspective of novelty, right? How do you define novelty, right? So if we were to have face-to-face, I would have asked you a few concepts of novelty. Let's start with this simple example. Now we are all working in the field of energy, right? So I'll try to be as general as possible, right? For instance, let's say, I think most of y'all are aware of biofuel, you know, the fuel that we are used to run our cars, right? So in my case, I am making biodiesel, right? Instead of going to the petrol station and pumping the petroleum-based diesel into your car, you can actually use the oil example from palm oil to make it into biodiesel, and then you pump it inside your car, right? So there are any types of oil can be converted to biodiesel. So if one day you discover a new type of oil that can be converted into biodiesel, does that justify enough novelty to write up an article? So I give you an example. I'm asking you an example. So if you discover one new types of oil that has never been reported, but basically you are using the same methodology, you're using the same characterization method, the analytical method, everything's the same. So the only difference is basically your feedstock. Is that sufficient for you is that justify that enough novelty for you to write an article, right? It's a very simple and layman's example, right? So my answer would be, now if we are face to face, I would have given that chance for you all to answer, right? But since we are not face to face here, so I'll just give you my perspective. Well, then I would have answered you back. It depends how do you articulate the concept of new feedstock in your article, right? I give you an example again. Let's say in your article, when you're writing up the article, you can justify that the feedstock, the quantity of the feedstock that is so abundant, and you can actually extract so much oil that it is sufficient to meet 50% of the world's biodiesel demand. You can see that is so important that the whole world needs to know about this new feedstock. Now, if you can justify that, I think there is a point, there is a certain degree of new discovery or novelty that may, again, I'm not saying that it will, that may justify that article to be accepted in any one of the energy journal, right? Again, but if the way you write up your article, you are just saying that, oh, this feedstock A is just another type among the many types of oil that can be converted into biodiesel, then by itself, there's no excitement in it. I hope you get what I'm trying to say. You need to generate a certain degree of excitement. So just now, as I said, the excitement point would be because it is so abundant that it can meet 50% of the world biodiesel demand. That itself shows that the world needs to know about the new feedstock, right? Or alternatively, so happen that the properties of this new feedstock is so much better than all the reported feedstock in the literature. From that aspect again, there is an excitement. You can sense the excitement. As I always tell my students and people that ask me, you need to have a certain degree of excitement in your discovery. Then only you want to share that excitement with your peers. That's why you need to write that article. So I hope that gives you a point of how do you actually gauge whether your content has enough novelty to start writing an article, right? So once if you think that you have enough content to write your article, the next thing is, as again, I come back, why do I say that writing an article is just like writing a storybook, right? Now, if I ask you, when you read a storybook, let's compare when you read an interesting storybook and when you read a boring storybook. What would be your experience, right? Let's talk about reading a good storybook. You know, most of the cases we tend to read our storybook just before bedtime, right? If you're reading a good storybook, you would try your best to keep on flipping the pages, although it may way past your bedtime, but you keep on flipping, right? But if you read a storybook that is badly written, there's no flow, you cannot understand what is the author trying to convey to you. What would you do? Immediately after reading 1 page, 2 page, what would you do? You will just close up the storybook and go to bed, right? Now, same thing. Now, why do I say this? You must remember, for your article to be accepted, it will, as what San Yan has just told us, most of the article will be reviewed by 2 reviewers, right? And most of the reviewers, and I can tell you that most other reviewers are people like us. They are among all of us. Common people like us will act as a reviewer. Your peers will act as a reviewer for your article. Now, what if, let you put yourself in the shoes of the reviewer. Let's say you are a reviewer, you're reading an article that is nicely written, properly written, the flow is there, practically good English, acceptable level of English. What we do, you would actually continue reading, or even better, if the reviewer can sense a certain degree of excitement in that article, he would actually continue reading your article. And if possible, you want the reviewer to finish reading the article when he first picked up your article. Why? You do not want him to put down your article and say that, okay, I'll continue reading when I have the time, right? You must remember, why do I say that again? Because you must remember that all reviewers are very, very busy people, right? So just imagine, if they are reading a badly written article, just like reading a badly written storybook, what would they do? After reading the first page, they would probably put down your article, and you will never know when they will ever pick up again your article to continue reading. And if they don't finish reading your article, they will not be able to submit a comment for your article. That's why if they don't submit a comment, then your article will always remain in the reviewing stage. Obviously, sometimes, or maybe most of the times, editor will try to look for alternative reviewers. But again, as I said, all reviewers are people like us. Again, a boring storybook or a badly written article will always be a badly written article. So depending on anyone that picks up a badly written article, and when they read, there's no flow, they don't sense the excitement, what they do is they just put down the article, and God knows when is the next time they're going to pick up and continue reading your article. And that's why your article is always stuck, right? Compared to if you're a well-written article, reviewers will just finish reading your article and they just have to submit your comments for your article. And once again, like what Sanya said, once we receive at least 2 or 3 comments from reviewers, we will be able to make a decision for your article, right? So again, as I said, now let me just recap again what I've said in the last 5 to 10 minutes, right? So the most important thing is you need to have a content, an excitement, a new discovery, or basically a novelty. And number 2, you need to have a good write-up, right? Basically a very, you don't have to be a perfect Shakespeare literature kinds of English, right? As long as the English must be understandable, the flow is there, there is no petty mistakes, right? Don't do simple, especially I would say, don't do spelling mistakes, because nowadays with our Microsoft software, whatever, they can detect all these spelling errors very, very simple. I mean, it's auto-detected, but yet if you do this kind of mistakes, petty mistakes, it shows that actually you don't put in enough effort to make sure that you come up with a reasonably good article, right? So that's very, very important, right? Okay. So once you have that, the 2 points in mind, let me go on with my presentation. So now, what the next point that you would think, once you have the content and you know that you have to have a good master in English, you have a good level of mastering English to write a good article, the next thing is you need to select what type of manuscript that you want to write, right? So again, I think most of us, we are familiar with full manuscript, full articles, right? But many people are not aware of letters or short communications, right? Certain journals, like again, you have to select, you have to go to the journal's website and look and see certain journals, they do accept short communication. Now, what are short communications? Short communications are discoveries that you find that is so important that it needs to get out there to your peers in a very, very short time, right? As soon as possible. Some very, very interesting discovery. For example, maybe you found a method that you can actually reduce the processing time from 2 hours to 2 minutes. You see, it's so exciting that, and it's so important that it needs to get out to your peers immediately. These are the points, these are the content that you can go for short communications. And the other aspect is also on review papers. I think now many journals, they accept review papers. Some journals, review papers are not by, it needs to be by invitation. Some journals, again, you have to go through the journal's website and read. Some journals, review papers can only be submitted through invitation, but some journals, they are open for submission, right? So again, it depends on what which journal are you submitting to, right? And now, lately, I think Elsevier came out with in this slide, I didn't update. They came up with 3 new research elements, 3 new publications. One is on Methods X, second one on Data in Brief, the third one, Software X, and recently, I think they launched the 4th series, which is on Hardware X, right? Again, these are a few new types of publication that you can explore, right? I can explain briefly on all these. Example for Data in Brief. You know, again, sometimes before we can come up with a certain set of data for our article, we may have done thousands more other experimental runs. And most of the time, these experimental runs will either end up in the appendix or supplementary materials, or maybe it will just maintain in our logbook. But we may never know if actually all these additional other data may be useful for other researchers or our peers. So that is actually an option for you to publish all your unpublished data, which may not be as critical as the core content in the main article, right? But they are actually the supporting data. Then you can choose the options to publish in Data in Brief, right? Or in Methods and X, specifically, you may have discovered a methods to improve the detection. As I said, detection, maybe you can reduce it 10% of the processing time, or you can reduce 10% of the usage of the reagent to do the analysis. Again, please go through the journals, please go through these few new options. We call it as a new options of publication. I think they're indeed very interesting. And again, as I'd like to stress, they have the 4th one, which is called the Hardware X, right? Okay, so now once you have decided on what type of manuscript you're planning, either a full article, short communication, or review articles, or any of the 4 that I've mentioned just now, then the next step is you go and choose your right journal, right? It is very important because you want to make sure that your article reach out to the peers that are working in your field, right? And obviously, you can always go to their website and you can see they normally give you the scope where you can read, right? But rule of thumb, I always tell my people that ask me, I think the simplest one is you can always, sometimes you don't have to go to this website. Sometimes the journals that you refer to are the journals that will be relevant for you to publish your article, right? I'm sure when you do your research, you do a lot of literature search, right? And I'm sure when you go through your literature search, you'll find that sometimes you will use certain journals very frequently, and you know that that would be the right journal for you to submit your article, right? And the other point about this is, I would like to take this opportunity also to highlight about special issue. Always look out for special issues of the journals that you're interested in. I think that is very important. You know why? Because special journal, we are always given a very short time frame for us to accept submission, to process the submission and get it published. And that would be a very good way for you to get your articles published quickly, right? And normally the processing time, the reviewing time will be very fast because editors will always give we are always very focused with special issues because it's very specialized. I give an example now. Just now Sanyan also told about the open access journal for Elsevier, and one of them is Energy Conversion and Management X. It is actually a mirror journal or an open access journal of the conventional energy conversion and management. Please don't get confused. This one is Energy Conversion and Management X, right? Currently, we are running a special issue on valorization of biomass for biofuels production. At the moment, we are running the final call because it was open for submission since February 2020, and I think this submission will close in September, end of this month, right? So again, I would like to take this opportunity for those of you that is working in converting biomass to biofuel, please consider this special issue for you to publish your work, right? Again, because you see the time frame when we close up by end of September, normally we will set the target to ourselves that within within 4 weeks after the closing date, we try to get all the submission, all articles submitted to be reviewed, right? So we hoping that by end of October, you will be able to get your first decision, right? So again, special issue. This is just one example. I'm sure from time to time, all journals, they do cover, open up special issues, right? Now coming back, what makes a strong manuscript? Again, it must have a clear and useful message. It must be in a logical manner. Readers grasp the research. A simple analogy again, I just stress, just like you're reading a good storybook, right? Make sure that the flow is there, right? Okay, so I think I'm running out of time, so I'll be a bit quick. I think now I will not go into the detail of process of writing. Again, I'll try to be as general as possible. I think we are all familiar in writing any article. Normally, you will have the title, abstract, and keywords. And as a core content, they have obviously, we have introduction, methods, result and discussion, conclusion, acknowledgement, references, and supporting materials. Now, recently, I think many of Elsevier journals, they use your manuscript your way, right? So don't be too restrictive with don't be too bogged down with the formatting, right? Don't worry too much on the formatting. You try to make it, I think one thing I like about Elsevier journals is they try to make authors have a very pleasant experience, right? So they always improve this one. And I think now I think it's called Your Manuscript Your Way or something like that, where you don't have to worry too much about the formatting, right? As long as the content is there, it's in a logical and there's a good way, that's good enough. And building an article, again, there's many ways how do you write out a full article, right? The most common method would be, first you have your data, like just now I said, you have enough exciting discovery. Sorry. And then you start writing your methods, you start writing your results, and then your discussion. Finally, after you've done all that, how do you conclude? And then only you write your introduction, and then you come up with your title, abstract, and keywords, right? So here, again, this is just a guide to you. Again, it's up to individual. Some people, they start writing abstract. Some people, they start writing the introduction, then only they follow the flow of the normal article. Some people, again, they may start as what I've shown you just now, right? So again, I would like to highlight a few key points in each of the section. Now, in the methods, describe how the problem was studied, identify the equipment and materials used. These are the key importance that you need to have in your methods. Include detailed information. Now, do not describe previously published procedures. Meaning, you say that if you have if you have actually published it somewhere, you can always cite back the paper that you have published. So try to be as brief as possible. Right? At the same time, it must be detailed enough so that your peers can repeat whatever that you are doing. Right? Ethics. I think in energy field, normally we are not relevant with ethics, but in case it involves any animal or any human subject, or even any secondary from humans, you need to get your ethics committee approval, right? So take note on that, right? Now, results include illustration and figures, include only data of primary importance. I know as researchers, everything is important to us. But again, in a manuscript, you do not want it to be overly heavy until the readers lose direction, right? As I always say, and also another simple mistake is normally researchers or authors tend to only give a direct interpretation of the results, right? They don't go in depth. I think another key important point I want to tell authors is, if you are reporting on something that is already well reported, widely published, you cannot cover the subject matter at the superficial level. High chances you will get a manuscript rejected. So you have to go in depth, right? Go dig deeper and deeper. Why? Why are you getting this trend? Why are you getting that trend? Go as deep as you want as possible, right? Again, sorry, I've covered discussion. Interpretation of result. Don't only just direct what you call that, explain whatever is given in a table or your graph. Again, you go deep. Remember to go deep, right? And importantly, compare your published result with your peers. That is very, very important, because we want to know whether the method they do is much better than your peers. Reviewers, authors, people always want to know whether is your method way much better. Is there any significant improvement in the level of knowledge, right? Be careful. Do not use statements that go beyond what the results can support. New terms not already defined or mentioned in your paper, right? Don't always assume that the readers know or the readers know all the terms or abbreviations that you use. Okay. Conclusion: provide justification for the work. Explain how your work advances in the field, suggest future experiment, right? Okay, now, as I said just now, once you cover all that, then they come to the introduction. Introduction, why? Because as you can see that as you go later and later stage, it becomes more and more important. Because through the introduction, you will justify the novelty. What is so exciting about your finding? That is very important. Then that has to be in your introduction, right? An abstract, be as brief as possible in one single paragraph. Summarize. So basically the abstract will have, basically an abstract is a summary of your introduction, your method, your findings, and also your conclusion, right? So everything has to be there. And you have to make your abstract as interesting as possible, right? So take the time to write the abstract very carefully. Many authors write the abstract last so that it accurately reflects the content of the paper. Because if people are not attracted with your abstract, they will just put down your paper and they will not continue reading on, just like a reviewer, right? And title, finally, make sure your title is again reflective of the content of your article, okay? Keywords, a quick point I always say, don't always, sometimes people tells me that don't repeat the keywords that is already in your title, right? Think other keywords that can represent your. Referencing, again, don't use too many references, right? Avoid excessive self-citation. Normally, you want to cite methods that you have previously published or some of the previous findings that you have published, right? Okay, acknowledgement. If you receive any funding from your funder, please remember to acknowledge of your advisors or suppliers that have donated, right? Proofread readers or typists that do not qualify to be one of the authors, but they contributed, so you may want to acknowledge them, right? Cover letter, again, I think I'll not go into detail. Make sure that you have a cover letter. Why is your manuscript so special to the journal? Why so exciting? Note special requirement. Some journals ask you to suggest reviewers. Some journals ask you to declare any conflict of interest. Okay. Finally, submit your manuscript and all the best, and hope that your manuscript will get positive response from the reviewers. So with this, thank you very much. And again, I want to thank San Yan for sharing this slide with me. I have to acknowledge her because I'm using the slides that she gave it to me. And again, also thank you to all of you for listening. And I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have later. Thank you. Can I pass it back to you, San Yan? Is it?
You can pass it over to Patricia. Patricia.
Oh, okay, so yeah. I stopped sharing.
Yes.
Yep. Patricia, so I pass the...
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, is that visible?
Not at the moment. It's probably loading. That's great. We can see it now.
Brilliant. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's morning time in the UK. This is quite early. So thank you for asking me to speak at this. I'm going to specifically home in on review papers, but I think there are some things that come out of this that are more generally useful. So I'm going to talk to you about how to write a good review paper. I'm going to try, if it will let me go through. Oh dear. Okay, we've got there. So I think we need to think about why people write review papers. And I've put down here a number of possible reasons. You may have been exploring some new research directions you want to share. You may have been exploring the interface between your subject area and an adjacent one. You've been carrying out a review of a particular topic, and the data collated suggests that a new research direction is needed. You've collated lots of literature review information. We often get reviews which have come in from PhD student and supervisor combinations, and we often get reviews that are based on government reports or policy reports. And the aim here is to avoid other people having to carry out that work all over again. You want to make use of the time and effort you've put into familiarizing yourself with the topic. So you've started a new topic area, you've spent 2 months learning all about it, and you want to write a review paper because you don't want to waste that 2 months of time. Directly after this webinar, I have a meeting with a brand new member of staff who's going to be working on an area that's totally new to him, and I will be suggesting that he write a review paper in about 2 months' time. Your supervisor says it's a good idea. You've heard that review papers get good levels of citations, and this is true. When we look at our journal profile and we look at review papers, they often have much, much higher citation levels than other papers. And you want to increase your outputs. It improves your professional standing. It improves your promotion and job prospects to be able to say you've written good, credible review papers. So all of those are some of the reasons why people write a review paper. But I think it's equally important to look at things from the opposite direction and think, why do people read review papers? I would suggest the top reason is that it provides an easy and accessible way of quickly familiarizing yourself with a new topic. It synthesizes things. And this is a really important function of review papers. I think it is the most important function, that it combines hundreds of publications in an area and brings them into a coherent whole, a coherent entity. There's the practicality, that it saves you having to read the 100 different papers published on a subject if rather conveniently someone has already written a review of pathways to aviation biofuels. And it helps you to prioritize the areas that you want to focus on, because you read the review paper, you see, well, lots of people have explored that conversion pathway, lots of people have looked at that feedstock, so if I want to carve out a separate niche, this is what I'll do. It provides an accessible summary. This is another really important function. Many of you are technical specialists in your areas, and most of these papers are written by technical specialists. But review papers are often read by people who are not specialists, who are coming to an area new, who may not ever do a lot of work in this area. I do a lot of work with governments and policy formulators, and we often have to provide them with information. And I will often point them to good review papers that are accessible, they're easy to understand. It links different areas in which you have an interest. I love getting review papers that take technology and also give an economic and an environmental perspective on that technology. I think that's a really important function. So I'm going to suggest that those reasons we looked at earlier about writing a review paper actually fall into good reasons, bad reasons, and in-between reasons. And that's based on what the reader wants to see. So all of these things up the top, these are all good reasons for writing a review paper, because these benefit the readers. But if you're looking at new interfaces, if you're looking at new research directions, then those are things that will always benefit whoever reads it. If you've gathered a lot of information and want to share it to save people time, then that's okay as a reason, that's fairly good. If you want to make use of your time because you've familiarized yourself, that's okay. These are really bad reasons for writing a review paper. Your supervisor says so, you want to get lots of citations, and you want to improve your promotional prospect. If those are your reasons, I suggest that you won't have that compelling idea, narrative, storyline that the previous speaker was describing. So, what does a good review paper do? It's obvious, it reviews. It summarizes, it synthesizes, it adds value. There is no point if you're not adding value, because if the information is already out there in different discrete formats, why not just go to the original contribution? It points the way forward. This is really important, especially for policy-focused review papers. So let's go through each of those one by one and think about what elements we need. And what I've done here is I've looked at my own journal, that's Biomass and Bioenergy, and I've picked out some of our most highly cited and most frequently downloaded papers over the last 2 years, which are review papers. And I've used those here as examples of different ways that you can achieve the different elements of a review paper. So first of all, it reviews. Typically, you are looking at most review papers having more than 100 citations. If it's got less than that, the scope is probably not broad enough to justify a review paper. Data range, it's got to be comprehensive. I get a lot of complaints from reviewers who say this person thinks that the world started in 2015. There's a history before that. So you've got to show a good understanding of the depth of knowledge on which you're building, but you must also include the most recent state-of-the-art findings. And it's often the case that those may not be in academic publications. So they may be in industrial implementation, in trials, in policy documents. So you may be looking at some very recent material that's actually in the process of being implemented. So you've got to have a comprehensive date range around what you're looking at. Geographical coverage, it is particularly pertinent to mention this when we're on a webinar, which I know you're coming from around the globe, but there's a particular focus here on Asia in our webinar today. And we will often get things, as the previous speaker mentioned, for a particular feedstock. And then I read through it and I think, well, that's nice, but there's only 2 million tons of this produced globally all around the world because it only grows in a very particular region. So you've got to think about the geographical coverage. The best review papers are global. They look at global issues that have potentially internationally significant futures. There are exceptions to that. If you've got a wonder material that only grows in the Himalayas, then by all means tell us about it. If you want to look at a particular agroecological zone, which has a particularly pertinent environmental problem, then that's fine. Or if your technical challenge just so happens to have been pioneered in Russia with a particular set of expertise, then that's okay. But by and large, review papers need to be global in their perspective. You've got to have a clear scope and objective to your paper, and these aren't predefined. So you have to say what they are and show how the material you've chosen fits that. So I've given you an example here of one from my own journal. And this time they've told us that they've looked at 138 original studies. They've looked at transitions, and what they've done is they've collated the data and grouped it to give the sense of variability across those 138 papers. They've told me that they get summary figures showing what the general trends are from 188 studies, and therefore what we know about soil carbon based on all of this. So they've clearly reviewed a lot of material, and the value that they've added is in that oversight and that wider perspective. Okay, it summarizes. A key term here is often meta-analysis, where people group the findings from different original research papers, but you may also be picking out key themes. You may be analysing the frequency with which particular events occur or particular systems are utilised. You may be looking at a large number of papers and bringing that down to a more digestible content. So I've given another example here from biomass and bioenergy, and this is conversion of lignocellulosic biomass to biofuels. And they make the point that this topic has already been widely studied, and that many studies have defined the ideal conditions for production separately, but very few things have looked at the integrated process, and their review is focused on that integrated system. So they find a unique niche which builds upon previous work, but actually integrates, summarizes, and brings things together. Okay, the next one, does it add value? To test if it's adding value, it's a question of whether what you're showing in the review paper could have been discovered just by one person sitting reading all the papers separately. And the answer should be no. And if that's the case, then we look at what are the comparison points? How does the compilation of this help you to make sense of the different factors and trends? So it's not enough, for example, to say that 100 different independent research articles have found that this is the best reactant to use in order to produce this compound. Therefore, it must be true. And my review has shown that 100 out of 110 find that one was best. Therefore, that's the added value. It doesn't work like that. The compilation itself has to give you that added diversity. So this is some work that I've shown, and this is actually one of my own papers, where we've looked at modeling, and we've looked at modeling across different scales and what models are applied in different contexts. And it's not just about looking at the individual models and saying these ones get applied most, therefore they are the optimal and they are what we should use. It's about adding value around the context in which different models are used, and these dimensions that we've put in around scale and around the type of objective in the research. And those don't normally come out in the individual research papers. So we're adding value, and it points the way forward. Review papers by definition are backward looking. They're looking at stuff that has already been done, but they do that in order to move forward. So your review paper should always talk about the knowledge gaps that remain, what that means about priorities for future research, what the most promising technologies are, what the implementation barriers are, and how will this feedstock, this technology, this implementation method make a difference to our understanding of the world and to the lives of people. So one that I've put down here as an example, this is a review of a particular feedstock over 30 years of research, but the important bit is the conclusion, that they conclude based on this 30 years of research and publications that this is actually rather a good crop to grow in the dry lands of the Mediterranean for multi-purpose uses. Okay, so a summary then. I would suggest that if you are writing a review paper, it has already been said by the previous speaker that you can contact the editor and that some journals will accept review papers and some don't. In my own journal, the policy is that we will always look at review papers that come in, but I do prefer it if people contact me first, because I have my own list of topics that would make a really good review paper. I have my own editorial board who constantly come to us saying it would be really good to have this. So if you make contact with the editor, it's likely that they may say, that would be a really good idea, but could you tweak it in this direction to cover this area as well? So I would suggest for reviews, always contact the editor first. And when you do so, you want to identify the topic, tell him who this is going to appeal to. Who is the audience for this review paper? Is it for policymakers? Is it for industrialists? Is it for academics? Who is it actually written for? Check you are adding value. So the editor wants to see in your cover letter when you send your paper in how this is adding value to the previous things that have been published and that you are citing in your work. You need to make it accessible. There was a lot said previously about the language and the storyline, and this is really important. For review papers, it is one of the most important aspects. People who are coming to review papers often because they are not familiar with the area, so you must simplify for them. You need to do the things we said: review, summarize, synthesize, add value, point the way forward. I suggest when you complete your review paper, you go through those 5 items and see if you can tick which paragraphs or which pages address each of those key points. And that is all the advice that I have for you on writing review papers. But I'd just like you to think about the fact that what I focused on here is the importance of a review paper from the reader's perspective. And I think it's something that we often forget about. We write papers in order to communicate what we've done, but it's really important to think about who is actually going to read this, why are they going to read it, what information do they want, and have you made it easy for them to access that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for this, Patricia. So the next stage of our session today would be the editorial panel discussion, where we have come up with a series of questions which we believe that might be interesting to have the panelists to answer. So joining us for this session, Professor Yan Jingyue has joined us for this. So the panel will comprise of Professor Yan Jingyue, Professor Patricia, Prof. Lee, as well as Sun Yan. So without further ado, let's take the first question. COVID-19 has been the great disruptor of our times, but this has also represents an opportunity for great change. So just wondering and putting it out there, are there any innovations within the academic publishing which you are hoping would come to pass? So let's not all rush to answer this question first.
Maybe I just kick this off. From my perspective, we are working a lot on this peer review innovations to accelerate review process for articles. One of the reasons is actually since beginning of this year, since started with this COVID, we received extremely higher number of submissions. This might be because many people, they are not traveling anymore and more people have time to sit down and write. I think for one of my journal, the submission tripled compared to the same time last year. So it's very important to accelerate the process, improve the efficiency, and make the best use of editor reviewers' time. We're trying to innovate in peer review.
I'll comment as well on that. I think one of the great things that has happened in the last few months is we've realized that we don't actually need to be in the same room as each other in order to have discussions like we're doing here today. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that's behind what has just been referred to about that increase in submissions. And there are some people that have more time for that. One of the things that does disturb me is the figures that have come out in some reports recently about who has been writing more papers. And I speak here as a female engineer and scientist, and it's mostly men who have been finding that they have time on their hands because they don't have childcare commitments at home to be writing more papers. So I think we need to be really careful about equality and diversity here. I think the load on reviewers that has been referred to is really important. And I am going to suggest that in my own journal, I think I am rejecting more before review because of that, because I'm conscious that, you know, I had to shut down all of our laboratories. I'm the Associate Dean for Research at very short notice. I had to manage the access protocols, the health and safety, and I had a lot less time for my journal submissions to be doing reviews as a result. And while some people sitting at home had more time, I'm conscious of the burden that I'm putting on my reviewers at the moment. So I think for me personally, I will get my figures in about a month's time, but I would be surprised if my journal hasn't rejected slightly more at the outset and passed through less to reviewers. And I suspect that the time scale is increasing because reviewers are busy juggling so many other things. But I think that the connectivity that we have internationally, I have ran webinars where I've had people from all corners of the globe chipping in who would never have come to a meeting in the UK. So I think that's the value of it, but we need to be strategic about the use of people's time in order to make the most of that.
Jan, maybe I just have a quick comment. You know, since you mentioned that authors are having more time to dig up data that may be stored deep under the cabinet, and they can start writing articles because they have more time because they don't have to go to the lab. But at the same time, you know, as handling editor, I think people are more willing to accept invitations to review. I find that I did not really do proper statistics, but I felt that it's a bit easier for me to get people to accept my invitation to review articles. And actually, that's actually a very good trend, you see. Yeah, because the more people review an article, I always believe is we should have about 3 to 4 people to review any article, because every single comment will always improve the quality of the article. So it's peer reviewing process is a very important and a very positive, if you take it in a positive manner, right?
Yes, we are talking about innovation within the academic publication. I believe the innovation is always ongoing without COVID-19 or without. So it's more, I feel more not from the editor rather than scientists. We have a little bit more time to thinking. And I do think we should speed up to publishing rather than what we should publish. And because we are busy with travel meetings, maybe now become less travels. But not necessarily we have less meetings. Maybe physically we have less meetings, but in fact, I feel a little bit, in fact, that change another trend, we have more meetings. For example, I couldn't join the first part because I have another meeting, and later we will have, because it's more easy to schedule meeting, because you cannot say I'm not there. And the virtual meeting, which at the beginning, somehow it's good for us to have new tools to help to meet each other. But if long run might change our working style and lifestyle. I don't see it's now it's we can see the change what has been affect to our future, but we will see.
Thanks everyone for the very concise replies, and it's also very illuminating on my part to learn from you on this as well. The second question I have would be on open science. So what is the panelists' thoughts on open science? Are there any paradigms which have been overturned specifically in the terms of energy collaboration? And how do you think this will evolve in a post-COVID-19 world?
I believe this is the question which we have been discussing a long time, and since we have increased trends of the open access, and for the one thing always like who are the, if we're talking about this as a business, is who is going to pay it, and I'm open for all the information to the open access, but at the same time, if we change to from before it's the reader is the client, and they are the customer, they can judge the quality. If I, for example, this similarly go to shop, and we don't like it, we don't buy it. But now it becomes seller, writer, or author as a client of the publisher. And so there is some conflict of interest in the business model. That's talking about as a business. For the information sparing, I'm sure it's good because you have more reader can free access to the material which we have. And also I like some new things happened, for example, like print, which can also can release their information early, even before the review. Again, there you have the issue which leads to the quality control, and because academic publication, we still keep the peer review as the tradition or the tool which can somehow control all the quality of. So it's always something good or bad at the same time. We will say it.
I'm going to comment on this from a bioenergy perspective. Bioenergy is incredibly controversial. That's one of the really interesting things about working in this space. And availability of data in an open forum is therefore absolutely key to trust and transparency and moving forward with appropriate institutions and governance. But I have huge reservations about the capacity of different individuals to wisely use and interpret that data. And that is what I see as the role of scientists, specialists who've been, working in this area for years. And I believe it is important that we put the information in the public domain, but also that we advise and guide on how it should be used. Now, I'm going to put something in the chat because I actually wrote an article about this topic recently and about the consequences that it has for peer review. And I think that we're sort of entering uncharted territory. It is, we have a system at the moment that has worked well for many years, and peer review has its problems, but by and large, it results in us ensuring that what we are putting out there is actually robust. And I'm slightly erring on to the next question here, but that it's robust and is verified and is real science. I get quite worried when I look at some of what I see in the wider arena, and the fact that where we have incredibly popular topics around climate change and energy in particular, that we are putting that information out to people who don't have the tools and understanding to be able to discern what is authentic and what is not. I think that puts a huge responsibility on us as scientists, and I do get concerned that open science, where we are more collaborative in sharing, but don't, as the previous speaker has said, have a plan in terms of how we pay for that, is a dangerous venture. I think it could work out, but it could actually unravel some of the building blocks that we have depended on today. We have a system that works at the moment, and changing one part of that actually upsets the balance of the whole thing. And I think we really need to think about that. I'm going to put a link in the chat in a moment or two to an article that I've written on this that will explain things a little bit further.
I think I will not take much time. I think I would like to support what Patricia had just said. I think she has said it very rightfully. I think whether our society is ready to accept open science. Do they know how to differentiate between right and wrong? Trustable? Is it trusted or not trusted? So I think it's also a very, very interesting, and I think we can open and debate it for the rest of the day with no conclusive answer, right? But I would like to share again, echo what Patricia said, is whether our society is ready for open science. That is something that we have to ponder upon. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also quite agree with all the previous speakers. I mean, we are exploring all business models and pilots that we can explore in open science, and try to find the best service and platforms for our authors. So it's still a long road to go. As Professor Yan mentioned, we see more and more preprints. And for Elsevier, we also have a preprint server, SSRN, you might know. We also have Energy IN dedicated on energy research. We do encourage authors to host their preprint version of article to the server, so get readers to read your research output at the earliest stage. Yeah, I will share the link of SSRN to the chat box as well, just in case you're interested. Thanks.
Thanks to the panelists for answering this question. So Patricia, this ties in and seeks into the next question which I wanted to ask. So how do we strike a balance between accessibility and the robustness of scientific knowledge? How are we able to make sure that information is able to be found? How are we able to make sure at the same time a right balance is struck to make sure that this information is accurate? Because this is something very, very prevalent in society as it is.
I'm going to be totally honest here. I don't know. And I have yet to meet anyone who has a good answer to this question. We need to be really careful, and the quotation I always give at this point is, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And to know a little bit about a topic area and to think that you can then delve into the depths of it, and to ignore the wealth of scientific knowledge that we have in the wider community is really quite worrying. Science is built on years of understanding and years of building on the work of our predecessors. And therefore, it's really important, because our work is funded by the public, to put that in the open domain and to make it accessible, transparent, robust. But, it's the fake news agenda all over again. We have to be really careful about what we're reading, and we have to be confident in the institutions who are presenting this to us. And I guess that this is where I see the role of publishers as guardians and custodians on this. We've talked in this webinar about the number of peer reviews we get and how robust those are and how independent they are. And that is absolutely key to our scientific endeavor, that we do that. So I have real concerns about how that works moving forward. And I'm afraid I don't have an answer to how we strike that balance.
Sorry, this one is a bit of a tricky question, but it's something very prevalent, which...
It's indeed very, very tricky. Again, I have to agree with Patricia. I think I don't have an answer, but I think if you ask me, I think it's not easy to strike the balance, but I think what's important now is maybe we need a paradigm shift in our education system. It's not teaching them the content, but maybe to differentiate between how do they make a judgment whether that information or that scientific data is authentic or it is questionable. I think it's time that we need to educate our people. There might need to be a shift in paradigm. It's not learning the content, but how to differentiate between right and wrong, questionable and authentic. I think with that, as I said again just now, I said if the society are ready for it, and in order to prepare them to be ready for that, they need to have that capability to make that judgment, right? So I think maybe as a publisher, Elsevier may want to advocate this kind of new, again, it's uncharted territory. I think it's interesting. How do you teach someone to make sure that this, even scientists like we ourselves, sometimes when we look at the data, we may question ourselves, is it really true or is it really questionable? I wouldn't say it's wrong, whether it's questionable or whether it's authentic. Right? So it's very, very interesting indeed.
Yeah, I believe this is in fact, there are two language environment to the public, to the scientists, and we should differ. And we are scientists, we cannot answer all questions in terms of scientific knowledge, in particular to the public. Because it is really different, and also public believe scientists always can answer all scientific questions. In fact, we are exploring the research question rather than we are giving the answer. So the process which what we are doing is just we try to be accurate, but you can never be accurate. So this is the process of the scientific research. Those should be somehow transferred to the public, which they understand. The answer is not white or black, or right or wrong, rather than another type of the answer. In fact, I like another way, which we, in Sweden, we are searching for any research fund. You need to write one page, so-called to the public, so-called popular scientific kind of description of your project. In somehow, when we are writing such kind of we found, we cannot use our terminology or our writing rather than try to give the answer to the question to the public. So that's a totally different kind of writing. And of course, our traditional academic journal, normally our reader are scientists. It's another way. I noticed there are a lot of new things happened. It's more like transfer our journal to kind of magazine in somehow to give some information to the public. And also those how they can be connected to the social media. And in another way to give more like the public audience and the readers, they can understand. This is under the process which I feel could be successful somehow, even change our scientists' view how we should give information to the public. And so this is totally different type of the audience and readers. And also I noticed you have another question later on, maybe somehow linked to this. And so I will give comments there later. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Yen. Don't spoil the questions that are coming up is what I would say. But thank you so much for sharing that idea when you have to write a simple pager where you can describe the scientific information in the one page so that there's popular understanding of it. So I think that's actually a very good idea that other countries may want to adopt as well. So the next question in the series would be, in a post-truth era, what do you perceive is the role which academic editors and publishers, because it's together, they have to play in ensuring and maintaining the integrity of scientific truth? How much of this is fueled by a perception in elitism of knowledge?
I think from publishing perspective, the latest technologies like very popular artificial intelligence, machine learnings are helping us a lot to identify potential integrity risks. So it is really I would say that I would always say to authors that don't cheat because we will always find it. And with a database, it's quite easy to actually for us to find those fake authors, fake reviewers, or any manipulation to the citations or any other actions. It's getting easier and easier to find. So yeah, I believe it's improving, and we are continuously working on upgrading the tools and the database technologies to explore on this.
I'll happily comment on the second part of the question about elitism. I think this is deeply concerning and is part of it's part of a natural response to the problem that there is so much information out there, such a proliferation of journals, so much on social media that we don't know what to trust. And therefore, I think there can be a tendency to retreat to the benchmarks, the things that we really believe are going to be giving us the right story. And people will therefore retreat to the ones that they've heard of. And one of the things that bothers me here is I sit in the UK. We have a system here called the Research Excellence Framework. And there are some very careful rules laid out on this. We are supposed to judge papers, journal outputs, based on their novelty, on their robustness, and on their impact. And it's very clear how this should be done. And some groups within different disciplines actually make the point that you should not look at citation counts and you should not look at where this is published. But there is a reality. And the reality is that when people are trying to review these things, they do look at the journal. And it really perturbs me when the name of a journal is used as a proxy for the quality of a particular paper within it. And I think that is a little bit about this perception of elitism, that if it was published in that journal, it must be good. And I think that's a really dangerous path to tread. And I'm sure that my other editors on this call would say the same thing, that there are some papers published in my journal which are brilliant, and there are some that are less good. We all have a range. And I believe that's true of all journals, actually. And we need to be getting beyond that. I think the perceptions of elitism is really quite worrying. But again, I don't have an answer. I'm beginning to sound like a broken record on this, on not having answers, I'm afraid.
Thanks a lot for that, Patricia. I think one of the things about the panel questions about here is that we're not looking to get fixed answers or outright answers per se, because a lot of these questions, they're all fundamentally entrenched in, well, the nature of scholarly publishing as it is. So it'd be great to actually have some of your insights. And I think the insights that everyone has been sharing so far has been excellent so far. So thank you so much for it. So I'm going to have to go through some of the questions a bit faster. So this one probably caters to something that applies to literally everyone. So science is meant to be apolitical. So how proactive should the scientific community be to address alternate facts, which is pushed by politicians?
I'll come in on that. I refute that science is apolitical. So scientific research and scientific findings are apolitical, but the communication of our scientific results has to be political. It has to be informing policy, otherwise there is no point in doing it. I strongly believe it's our duty and our responsibility to provide information to guide policy. But I think the alternative facts is a total red herring. I spend a lot of time working with policymakers at national level in my own country, and I have built up good relationships over many years with many key civil servants rather than the political taskmasters. I think what is important is that the underpinning body, the civil servants who are making the decisions and providing the information, understand our area. I think it behoves us to build relationships with them, to inform them, to reach out to them. They can't see a lot of the journal material that gets published. And I think that we need to do that. Our responsibility is to translate what we're doing into means appropriate for them. And we need to be really proactive about that. If we do that effectively, there won't be an issue with alternative facts, because the politicians will encounter that challenge within their own departments, and then we won't have the problem. So we need to get on the front foot and be proactive with the entire policy machinery if we want to sort this out.
Yes, I agree. It's more like if we're doing science, we should be more within the science. And of course, outcome should have try to approach to the decision maker. But rather than another way we have been like pushed by the politician, we should be pushed. So that's a different view to look these questions. And so I still believe that we are doing the research. We should be more like, I like the statement, science is meant to be a political, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't transfer our message to dissemination of the message to be a decision maker, in particular for the energy research, which is really very linked to the implementation and the future scale up of the technology, which has to be such a kind of message should be given to the decision maker. So this is very important. And energy is not only pure science, it's a lot of things linked to the implementation.
Thank you both for that. I'm going to fast forward a bit to a couple of questions which were emailed over to us from the participants of this webinar. So I really want to make sure that everyone's actually involved in this. So someone has asked, what are the methodologies and the research designs in conducting renewable energy research?
It's just, I believe this is a very big question. And my people talking about renewable energy is such wide coverage, and talking about the methodologies, they are all different concepts. I believe it's really depend on what's the in particular research question you are linked to. And so start with, if I say the methodology should be linked to the problem, and rather than from the science to application, in particular energy research, that's always, I believe. Maybe I'm the editor-in-chief in applied energy, which I have put applied to be a very important value of the journal. But I believe energy is the area which you should be thinking about. Your results should be applied, and that's why I would say that when you design your methodology, you should start with the problem, rather than to think about to publish a paper, and rather than try to solve one research question or few research questions. That's what starting point should be very important. We do see the paper, in fact, as an editor, we have read so many papers and manuscripts. We do see that the author just want to publish one article or want to solve one problem. So those will be totally different when you are writing, when you are doing the research, and can totally give the different kind of the article you say at the end.
I'll add one thing to that. I agree completely that the methodologies and designs are diverse and vary greatly across the different resource and technology sectors. However, there is a global challenge around energy, around the equitable access to energy, and around the climate impacts that arise from it. And when we are looking at renewable energy research, if it isn't advancing carbon reductions or energy access globally, then I don't think we should be publishing it. Sorry if that offends some people, but I just feel this is really important.
This might be relevant to another question, Patricia, we discussed about before. you mentioned how to bring in this interdisciplinary insights into energy research. Would you like to, sorry to put in spotlight, would you like to address that part as well? Because I noticed Nicholas jumped to Q9.
Okay, yeah, the interdisciplinary elements are incredibly important. So I have spent far too long now working in academia in interdisciplinary institutes, and getting to the level where you have engineers who understand scientific reactions and are also able to talk to social scientists around behavioral elements, around public acceptability, understand the environmental concepts, that actually takes years and years and years. And it is highly unlikely that a PhD student is going to be able to do that. I think it's important when we train students and train researchers that we expose them to those different ideas. And so to look at your question 7, how to identify collaborators, yes, they have to be from other disciplines. You have to go outside your comfort zone. I was just looking this morning at a submission which some of my researchers put in for a proposal on a big project over the weekend. And they have collaborated with people who look just like them in other European institutes. And I think that's frankly a waste of time. We need to be collaborating with people that we don't understand, and finding the space and zone to do that is really important. Now, I think there is a great tool here that is now open to us in a way that it never has been before, and that is social media. And simplifying what you've done and putting it out there in the academic community using tools like LinkedIn, I use an awful lot, but also Twitter to some extent, and putting those out and explaining that can help you to attract collaborators. I find it particularly useful for industrialists. If I put messages out about what I'm doing and say I'd be interested in hearing from people doing this, I generally am inundated with responses. So use the tools that we have available to us, and don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone, because it's the only way to learn.
Yes, I totally agree. It's in fact, energy, it is the area which has linked to different disciplines. And when I do the research, if you ask me what my discipline, I would be very difficult to define it, because if what I've studied in the undergraduate or postgraduate or later on. And if you look at my group, we have scientists from social science and in economics and engineering. It's a totally mix of the different kinds of competence and expertise. We are talking about the one thing about collaboration, and in fact, Applied Energy, we are trying to do something. For example, we try to establish a UniLab, which try to link to different kind of scientists from the global in terms of we call the research and innovation without borders. The border can be discipline and can be the geographic border. And what we are trying to do, you can find very interesting topics which we need a group of people to working together. That's one way to do, and through the journal, because we know the author and with a different kind of background, we can somehow try to integrate, group them together. And that's why we call the UniLab. And the uni can be united, it can be a university lab, or could be other unique lab to working together. In such a way, I think you put different kind of people and working towards one, as I mentioned about, we need to solve the problem. We need to find what kind of research question, which is very important in terms, for example, as climate change mitigation and other issues. And energy, there are so many problems there, challenges, it says, but we do need people to working together. And somehow, as the editor, I read a lot of papers. And for example, we have more than 10,000, maybe if looks the authorship and covers 100 countries in Applied Energy. If those people can work together, and somehow, I say this is, for example, like a broad movement of the moleculars. But if we use the journal as one tool to all them together, it might be we can really save a lot of energy and time. So this is not only the interdisciplinary collaboration and also the how to have the synergy and joint effort to working together. So that's, we do need some kind of new innovation, in fact, in terms of collaboration, but the journal might provide one tool or platform to encourage people to working together. But still, it's one thing I always feel like, because we are more like a hobby to do this kind of work. And what time, if we have enough time to do this, and that's one thing, always a little bit our limits to do, but it's very important to let people working together. And we can find some very good, what's called organized without organization. And for scientists, you will find the common target. They can working together. And so that's the one part we are trying to do. Now, so far we have more than 10 unit labs in different topics, and they are takes the lead to do special issue and the workshop and the seminars, which is somehow is I do say it's a very good initiative to encourage people working together. So that's one I would say I would like to share with our audience and others too. This is the one way maybe they can try to work in together.
I think I'll just have a quick comment on that. I think energy, interestingly, energy or specifically renewable energy is a field that is relevant to every single one of us. So if you are working on renewable energy and you want to make an impact, it's very, very clear. You need to have social scientists in your team. Why? You need to have the society to accept your technology. I always say renewable energy is always more expensive than conventional energy. And you want the people to pay extra for that. You need them to accept that. And there's no way we scientists from the hardcore science, engineering, or in science to be able to understand the social demographic, how the understanding, how would they expect, how do they perceive, how do they accept renewable energy. There's no way we can do that unless we involve the social scientists. So that itself, we can actually bring in the social scientists to work together with them. And obviously we know that, again, as I said, it's more expensive. How do we actually reduce the cost? And we need to do it fast. Global warming, but everybody is experiencing that. So if you want to reduce the cost much, and history has shown that over the years, you know, that the cost has been coming down, but if you want to accelerate that, we need to work across all the fields. We need scientists, we need from the engineering, things like that, so that we can accelerate the reduction in cost, right? So if all of us work together, I think it's a perfect field to pull together researchers from all disciplines. And trust me, I believe that actually anyone in any discipline can actually contribute in energy, or basically in renewable energy.
Thanks a lot for everyone on this illuminating insight. I think this is actually a very good, I learned a lot from this as well. So thank you so much for this. Something also came through our email yesterday, and someone was asking quickly, what are the latest trends in renewable energy research? So would anyone want to share on this?
It's still it's a very big question, and as editor, because the renewable energy is one part of the very important research topics, and of course we always try to follow the trends. And in fact, it's very difficult to say a few words say what are the trends. And again, we should link to our research into the problem. And what I believe is one very important, when the renewable energy technology and the implementation and start to play a very important role, and renewable energy become not alternative energy rather than come into the new mainstream of the energy. And that means this research question relate to the high penetration of renewable energy. And then the renewable energy will be play a more important role in the whole energy mix. That will together makes the whole system become more complicated. So that's why I feel like the flexibility, which has been, if you're look at the fossil fuel-based energy process or system, is not so important, but now become more important. If I want to pick some of the trends, I would say the flexibility linked to the high renewable energy penetration is very important. In fact, in this area, we do need what we have mentioned, the interdisciplinary research, including for example, you need a location, and so G-system, geographic information technology could be very useful. And you need local dynamic performance, and then you introduce the time into the dimension, and then there's a lot of AI technology might be start to play. You need robust sensor and to be able to quickly collect the information and transfer information, and to have the robust control. And all this become more dynamic. And so that's one thing if I talk about renewable energy technology itself, and associated with high penetration of renewable energy, we do need to pay attention to the flexibility. And
okay.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Can I give a different perspective on that? For me, and maybe it's just because I work in the bio area, the biggest transformation that I've seen in recent years is a focus on net zero. And net zero means that we need to remove and store carbon as well as provide all our energy needs. Now, there are two consequences of that. One is an increasing focus on greenhouse gas removal technologies and CO2 utilization. So those are both really important emerging areas because we're making use of the CO2. The second consequence is an increasing focus on hydrogen, because we can no longer afford to have carbon atoms floating around at risk of reaching atmosphere. The hydrogen discourse I find slightly perturbing because at the moment it remains dominated by those who have been working in hydrogen for a long time and/or focus solely on electrolysis. And I think looking at those vectors, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's ammonia, whether it's something else, is a really fruitful area. So if people are looking for new areas to look at, net zero, greenhouse gas removal from atmosphere, hydrogen, ammonia, and other non-carbonaceous vectors. And the final one I'm going to give a mention to, I note we have a number of attendees here from places that I have worked in over many years, like Thailand, Philippines, and elsewhere. And I think energy access is a really important sustainable development goal that underpins many of the others. And I think as we move forward as a society, providing global energy access in a considered way that has taken account of all those other things we talked about, cost, carbon, socioeconomics, and social scientist perspectives, acceptability, that is really, really, really important. Transitioning the planet from still a predominant use of fuel wood use in many parts of the world and unsustainable industrial practices to much more sustainable futures is absolutely key to our survival as a species. And it's sort of beyond me why more people can't see that and why they continue to focus on little microcosms in Europe and the US and can't look beyond that to what's happening in Eastern Europe, Russia, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere.
If you ask me what's the latest trend, I think I would answer you personalized renewable energy. If you can actually personalize renewable energy to suit every single one's need, I think that would be the way forward. You know, I think the community 10 years down the road, people are getting smarter and smarter, and they will know how to think what they want, and they'll decide what they think that is suitable for them. It's no longer for us, not for scientists to dictate what is good for them, but they want to determine what is good for them, right? So I think maybe personalized renewable energy research, if that brings any meaning to it, I think that is the way forward. I mean, that would be the trend coming up. Thank you.
I would probably, I think Nicholas probably would also agree that we would recommend our readers to look through the topics page in Science Direct. We are gathering the latest research outputs in different subject areas, and based on the analysis and the data information, of course, but hope that could give you a view on the latest trends from data perspective.
Thanks a lot, Sun Yan. You probably helped me with that. Thank you so much, Professor Yan, Professor Patricia, and Prof. Lee. It's approximately 5:01 right now. We overshot our quota of questions, and we probably have about 300 questions that we've been trying our best to answer, but unfortunately, we might not have been able to answer all of them. But thank you so much for everyone's attendance and participation today. I hope this was an educational experience for everyone. I certainly learned a lot from the four esteemed panelists here, and thank you so much for your attendance today. Once again, thank you very much. Do be safe, please stay healthy. And if we can trouble you for a little bit before you leave, can we trouble you to leave your comments at the SurveyMonkey link that you can see in front of you, or you can simply scan the QR code. So I'll give you maybe about 20 seconds for this. In the meantime, thank you so much, everyone. I hope this was an educational experience. Thank you for your time. We see you soon for the next session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.